As far back as we go in history, man has always communicated with symbolism from the ancient hieroglyphics in Egypt to the modern alphabet. It is unfortunate these sacred symbols many times were adopted later in history by secret organizations, organizations of power, or given a stigma by the church to represent evil or heretical meanings. Whether its intent was done on purpose or not, the result has been that man has lost important information about his history through fear. For example, the swastika is an equilateral cross, with its arms bent at right angles. Earliest archaeological evidence of swastika-shaped ornaments dates back to the Indus Valley civilization of ancient India as well as classical antiquity. Swastikas have also been used in other various ancient civilizations around the world. It remains widely used in Indian religions, specifically in Hinduism, Buddhism, and Jainism, primarily as a tantric symbol to evoke Shakti, or the sacred symbol of auspiciousness. The swastika is also a Chinese character used in East Asia representing eternity in Buddhism. After Adolf Hitler's rise to power in the 1930s, a swastika was incorporated into the Nazi Party flag, which was made the state flag of Germany. As a result, the swastika became strongly associated with Nazism and related ideologies such as fascism and white supremacism since the 1930s in Western world and is now largely stigmatized. The Eye of Providence, or the all-seeing eye of God, is a symbol showing an eye often surrounded by rays of light or glory, and usually enclosed by a triangle. It is sometimes interpreted as representing the eye of God watching over humankind, or divine providence. Imagery of an all-seeing eye can be traced back to Egyptian mythology and the Eye of Horus. It also appears in Buddhism, where Buddha is also regularly referred to as the eye of the world through Buddhist scriptures. Most recently, the all-seeing eye was adopted as the elite's favorite symbol, represented as an all-seeing eye atop a pyramid, the symbol for a top-down command and control system of compartmentalization. It is important to note that these recent adaptations are not the real meanings of these ancient symbols, and that we must look past our recent history to discover who we are. We should not be afraid of the symbolism just because large corporations and power elite decided to use them for their own. Additionally, we should not let fear control us because the church has given certain symbols the stigma of witchcraft or evil. If we wish to truly know where we came from, we must put down all those preconceptions and approach all of the symbolism and archetypes with the innocence of a child. According to the Masonic Lodge of Education, the Masonic letter G reminds us that every act is done in the sight of the great architect of the universe. It is believed that it stands for YHWH, the name of the great architect of the universe, pronounced Yahweh, sometimes pronounced Jehovah, in the ancient Hebrew language from which the Bible was translated. The letter G stands for geometry, which is the mathematical science upon which architecture and masonry were founded. It is important to note that the Masonic G is normally seen with inside the symbol of a hexagram and typically surrounded with what appears to be the rays of a sun. Additionally, in history, one can find the Yahweh symbol in the middle of both the triangle and the hexagram. In correspondence, we can see the G and the Yahweh symbol also correspond to the 7 stars located inside the hexagram. In tying all of this to Orion, we read the following in the Bible. Amos chapter 5 verses 8. Seek him that maketh the 7 stars and Orion, and turneth the shadow of death into the morning, and maketh the day dark with night, that calleth for the waters of the sea, and poureth them out upon the face of the earth. In part 1, we were able to see that the great teachers of wisdom were teaching enlightenment. Upon careful interpretation of the Bible, we can see the same correspondence. The 7 stars also refers to the 7 chakras, and there is a correspondence between the physical world and the mental universe. For we know from the Kabbalion that the universe is mental, held in the mind of the All. Additionally, Jesus said that the Father's kingdom is within and is outside you, which is also in alignment with the principle of correspondence. As above, so below. As below, so above. This is the reason why you many times see Jesus sitting inside a hexagram. because he had reached full enlightenment from his 7 chakras. Additionally, this is also why you see Jesus sitting inside a Vesica Pisces. The Vesica Pisces also represents sacred geometry in correspondence with the Masonic G, and also the flower of life, which represents how everything in the universe is constructed in our reality, a construction of the mental universe. Dionysus is thought of as being Greek, but he is actually a remake of the Egyptian god Osiris, which is also associated with the constellation of Orion. Dionysus was a prototype of Christ with a cult center at Jerusalem, where during the 1st century BCE, he was worshipped by the Jews. Dionysus' symbol is IHS, later became known to represent Jesus. Dionysus can typically be seen holding a staff in the form of a caduceus with a pine cone atop with 2 intertwining serpents, the pine cone typically deciphered as consciousness. With all the aforementioned information, we can see how all of this begins to tie together. From part 2, we learned that the Orion Nebula is displayed in 3 different churches. In the first church of the Jesu, the bright spot corresponds to their symbol IHS. In the Cathedra Petri, we see that the bright spot corresponds to the dove. In the St. Charles Church, we see that the same bright spot, the Tetragrammaton, corresponds to Yahweh. And finally, we determine that the Masonic G also corresponds to Yahweh. Therefore, using logic and deductive reasoning, we can determine the following. Since we now know that all 3 churches are displaying the Orion Nebula, then logic tells us each of the symbols are representing the same area in the Orion Nebula. And additionally, since we know that the Masonic G also represents Yahweh, then we can now perform a mathematical association between all the symbols. All of the symbols represent the same thing and are pointing to the same area, the bright spot in the Orion Nebula. Question: what is contained within the bright spot of the Orion Nebula that is being referred to as Yahweh? Using the highest resolution photograph taken by the Hubble telescope in 2006, we can now gain a glimpse of what it is the church is pointing to. It is important to note that upon first glimpse of the area contained in the center of the Orion Nebula, we notice a yellow triangle. Upon closer inspection, one can see the yellow triangle is overlapping on top of a pink triangle, forming an hexagon, or a double triangle. Flipping over to the infrared photograph, we can see that in the middle of that hexagram, there is a darkened area that forms an eye. Flipping back over to the Hubble photograph, and by performing a one-click equalization between the variances of light in that area, we can see that the object they are pointing to appears as a self-feeding tornado or whirlwind. Given the amount of time it will take to explain this phenomenon, stay tuned as we will cover this in more detail in part 4.